Hi, everyone. I am Diana Hill. I'm sorry we have a little bit of a late start here. We were having some technical difficulties with Zoom, and I'm going to introduce myself since we had a little bit of difficulty with getting Philippe on. I am a clinical psychologist in Santa Barbara and a graduate of UCSB. I was a biopsych major at UCSB, and oh, here's Philippe. He's on, so maybe you could
Hello,
join us.
hello.
Yay!
Yeah. Well, thanks for starting that. Sorry for the glitch, but yes, if I may introduce you, first of all, thank you so much for being a contributor to the climate resilience course and being with us. And Dr. Diana Hill is a modern psychologist, redefining what it means to live with vitality and healing many people. As a leader in psychological flexibility, and I can attest to that because I've used the app that she and Steve Hayes have put together, and I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful tool. She empowers individuals to reclaim and focus their energy in meaningful, sustainable ways. She is an expert in acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, behavioral psychology, contemplative practices. Diana bridges science with real life application to help people cultivate climate resilience and well being. And she's the host of Wise Effort podcast and the author of Wise Effort: How to Focus Your Genius Energy Where It Matters Most. I know I should exercise, but I love the titles. dot, dot, dot. The Self Compassion Daily Journal, ACT Daily Journal. Her insights have been featured in NPR, Mindful Magazine, Women's World, and other things. You can learn more about her, definitely from her website, drdianahill.com, and connect with her on social media. I'm just grateful that you're here and to open up some self-compassion and bring yet another lens into taking care of ourselves. So I give you the microphone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you, Philippe. Yeah, we're opening up another lens tonight, and it's actually one that's connected to all of these lenses, right? Compassion, and in particular, how we offer kindness, care, encouragement to ourselves when we are struggling. And I'm going to be offering some practices at the end of this talk, but I wanted to share a little bit about some ideas around self-compassion, what it is, what it's not, why it's helpful. And one thing that was not mentioned in my bio is, I'm gonna get my slides going, is that I am also a bee guardian. And a bee guardian is different from a beekeeper. So bee guardians, we biodynamically create spaces for bees to have a shelter. And it's an exchange, right? Where the bees come and they take care of our fruit trees and our land, and we create a little space for them to go. We don't come and take their honey from them as much as we clean out the hive when it needs a little cleaning. And a particularly hot day here in Santa Barbara, my husband called me out because all of the bees had gathered at the edge of this little opening right here. And the honeycomb melts at about 140 degrees or so. So the bees had left the hive because the comb would melt if they were all in there, their hot little bodies together. And they did this amazing thing of making a bee beard where they flap their wings as fast as possible to cool off the hive. Inside the hive is the brood, the baby bees and the larvae, and all of the things that their treasures that they've collected and worked so hard to collect. And I think about us gathering here as part of this climate resilience project, as sort of like these bees that are gathering together, working together. And none of these bees are actually criticizing each other or criticizing themselves. They're just doing the hard work of responding to a need. But oftentimes, we don't follow the genius of nature. And actually, there's a whole science that's around the genius of nature, which is biomimicry, looking to nature to help us solve our problems. Oftentimes, we don't do that. And we do something else instead when we are struggling, which is we can be very self-critical, we can be judgmental. If I were to put a voice recorder to my head today, and you were to listen to some of the worst moments, like when we were having a hard time getting on Zoom, right? All the things that were going on in my head, things like, oh no, how am I going to introduce myself? I'm not going to do a good job, blah, 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 blah. All of the sort of ways in which we don't support ourselves when we are struggling. And if I put a voice recorder to your head and said, okay, now I want you to play that to all your friends and family or even strangers, you may say, oh no, I would never want someone to know like what's actually going on inside my head. This is the nature of the human mind. We have a tendency to kind of lean a little bit towards maybe being self-critical. But what we know is that doesn't really help us, especially when we are struggling, especially when we're trying something new, especially when we're stepping out of our comfort zone. And right now, when we're facing so much uncertainty, so much change, a lot of students are moving into midterms. It's a stressful time. It's a stressful time in on our planet and our communities. This is the time when we need to be more like those bees, where we're gathering together and supporting ourselves and each other. But instead, we're kind of stuck in the hot hive and often can be quite harsh with ourselves. So self-compassion is a practice. It's a practice of choosing a path, and the path is a path of kindness. It's a path of mindfulness, of being present with ourselves, acknowledging when we are hurting, and it's a path of common humanity, which is understanding that we all struggle, we all hurt, we all have moments where we make mistakes or we don't show up in the way that we want to show up. This is the nature of being human, and sort of the first noble truth of our humanity is that we all struggle. Self-compassion is a response to that struggle. And it comes naturally for many of us to have compassion for others. So if you could think about a really like good friend, and when they were having a hard time, your tone of voice, how you felt towards them, what you said to them. I'd love for us to actually use the chat here, if you have access to the chat, to write down, if you can think about the last time a friend was struggling, something that you might have said to a friend that was struggling. I can think about a friend that mine whose dog died recently, and some of the tone of voice, what you said, how you said it. For many of us, that comes sort of naturally. But then if you think about the last time you were having a hard time, and if you were to say those same things to yourself, what it would feel like. Because oftentimes we don't say the same thing. You know, we say something that isn't as encouraging or kind, or even the tone in which we speak to ourselves isn't as soft or caring as we would somebody that we care about. One of the things that people often are afraid of with self, there's actually a whole thing around fears of self-compassion. We're afraid that if we're kind to ourselves, it's selfish. We're afraid that we'll be lazy. We're afraid that we'll lose our edge. And so actually, as part of a sort of exploration of self-compassion, I wanted to look at what's the difference between self-compassion versus selfishness, right? Especially at a time like this, because we don't want to be selfish when so many people are struggling, right? But there is a real distinction. Self-compassion is being kind, understanding, and supportive towards yourself, especially during your struggle, whereas selfishness is being primarily concerned with yourself and it's at the expense of others. And what I found as a parent, as a friend, as a teacher, as a daughter, as a sister, is that when I am kinder toward myself, when I balance my well-being with sort of the community's well-being, I can show up better for others. It improves my relationships with others. I don't feel better than, we sort of feel interconnected. And you may notice that there's some fears that you have around self-compassion, around being kind to yourself. But when you start to try it out, you probably will be, as we find in some of the research, is that self-compassion actually helps you be able to handle life stressors in a way that gives you more energy to be able to help others. So students in particular, when they've done research studies, there's been over 2,000 studies of self-compassion. Students who are self-compassionate do a lot better in terms of managing academic pressure. They have less anxiety. They have, their academic performance is improved. Same thing with athletes. Like if you are an athlete and you have a bad game, or you get injured, or a training issue, you actually, if you turn to yourself with kindness, if you remind yourself, hey, I'm here for you, you're doing the best you can, if you use self-compassionate statements and you're present with your own struggle, you're more likely to bounce back from those setbacks. So today I want to share with you 3 practices. We're gonna do them together that are ones that have a nice lineage from contemplative practice, but also ones that have been researched to be helpful to help us with compassion. But I want to talk about 2 quick research studies that are my favorites before we go into those practices. And one is a smoking example, and this comes from Kelly McGonigal's book, The Willpower Instinct. She talks about this research where they had smokers pull out a pack of cigarettes. If you can imagine, maybe you're not a smoker, but maybe you have something else that you go to when you are stressed that you'd rather you don't go to when you're stressed. Okay. So imagine going to that thing. This is my version of a cigarette social media, right? So imagine going to that thing that you go to when you're stressed. And on a lot of cigarette packages, they have warnings like, smoking causes cancer. Okay. So you're pulling out the thing that causes stress for you, pulling out your cigarette pack, and then you're reading the warning, smoking causes cancer. And now what do you think is going to happen to your stress? Right? And now you're holding that thing that you go to when you're stressed, and you're more stressed than when you started. What do you think you're going to do with that thing? You're going to smoke, right? So a really powerful intervention would be maybe on a cigarette package or maybe on a phone to have it say, instead of warning this causes cancer or warning this makes you depressed or makes you anxious, to say something like, it looks like you're having a hard time. Why don't you put this down? Put your hand on your heart. Take a breath. Take care of yourself. What is it that you need? If we could put and insert a little self-compassion into those moments when we're struggling, into those moments when we grab for that thing, then maybe we could choose a path that is more regulating for our nervous system, but then also co-regulates others' nervous systems, just like those bees at the hive. Because when we practice taking care of ourselves, we're also modeling that to the other members of our community. Another really favorite example is this donut study where they had students that were in a research study come in that were restricted eaters. They had everyone eat a donut. Half of them were told after they ate a donut, hope you're not so hard on yourself. Everyone eats unhealthy and sometimes. The other half weren't. And then they put them in a room with the bowls of candy. And the folks that were given this self-compassion intervention of, I hope you won't be so hard on yourself sometimes, actually ended up eating less candy. Because as when we practice self-compassion, we actually make wiser choices for ourselves. So the first practice that you can do anywhere, anytime, you don't need essential oils or a bathtub to do this practice, is the compassionate pause. And it's just what I was saying with the holding of the cigarette package or whatever your version of cigarettes are. When you notice inside that you're having a moment that you're struggling with, you pause. Instead of rushing right through it, instead of doing that thing you always do to escape from it, instead of blaming yourself for feeling it, you pause. And notice how I'm putting my hand on my chest. There's a lot of beautiful research around the power of compassionate touch, skin to skin. This is what they do when you have babies. You put the baby skin to skin because we know that that activates our oxytocin. We know that that changes our nervous system. So you could put your hand on your heart. Maybe sometimes people like to do a little hug, a hand on a cheek. You can play with this. You're on a webinar, so no one sees you. What feels best for you? And pause. And in that pause, we just practice a little mindfulness of, where do you feel it in your body? What's happening here? What do I need? Simple as that. You can do it in class. I'll do it when I'm sitting across from a client. You can do it in line. You can do it with your roommate right there. No one knows you're doing it. You're practicing the compassionate pause to acknowledge that you are struggling, and you're slowing things down instead of steamrolling right through. So trying it for yourself right now, finding maybe something that is difficult for you, noticing where you feel it in your body, something that's stressing you out, where do you feel it? And slowing down to pause with it. And then you could put your hand where you feel it. Slow your breath down and just acknowledge it. I see you. I'm here for you. What do you need? Simple as that, the compassionate pause. I love secret mindfulness practices that no one knows when you're doing them. You know, you're at like dinner and nobody knows that you're practicing, but you can do it, eyes open. The second practice of self-compassion is starting to pay attention to how you are talking to yourself. And I love wise speech, the principles of wise speech that come from the Eightfold Path. But these principles of wise speech are often talked about in how we could talk to others, right? But before we start talking to others in a wise way, what if you were to start talking to yourself in a wise way? All of us have a wise inner self. We know we have it because that wise inner self just gave your friend some really compassionate talk, right? Or gave your dog or your mom or your sibling or your, someone you don't even know, a stranger in line. So we want to turn that wise speech on towards ourselves. And there's 4 qualities to wise speech. The first quality is it kind? So you want to check yourself on your thoughts. Like think about something that you're struggling with and how you tend to talk to yourself when you're struggling with that thing. Maybe you're feeling rejected or left out. Maybe you're struggling something academically or something in your home life or struggling with a relationship. When you talk to yourself about that thing, you can say, is it kind? What am I saying to myself kind? And then the next question is it true? Is what I'm saying to myself true? And it doesn't have to be true like with a capital T, but it's just starting to question that thought a little bit so you don't hold it so tightly. Again, think about that thing that you tend to, maybe talk to yourself about. You can ask yourself, is it helpful the way I'm talking to myself right now? Sometimes it can be totally kind and totally true, but it's actually not helpful. you know, say you want to, getting out of bed in the morning early to go for a walk before class or something like that. It could be kind to say, stay in bed, it's cozy. It could be true, I'm too tired, but actually it's not helpful to say those things. And maybe it's more helpful to say, hey, let's get out of bed. Let's motivate ourselves to get out into the day. Sometimes we need a little bit of compassionate, tough love, right? And then the third one is it a good time? Is this a good time for me to be talking to myself about this? Maybe it's not timely. Maybe it's the middle of the night when you're having worries. So do this little checklist with yourself to see if you're engaging in wise speech. And wise speech, wise, compassionate speech, has these qualities of things like the things that you would say to your good friend. It's understandable you feel this way. I can see you're hurting. I'm here for you. You aren't alone in what you feel. It makes sense you are struggling. And sometimes it's even helpful just to write down a few of these. You can keep them in your phone. You can say them to yourself. You can create your own little self-compassion mantra. Um, you know, it's okay to talk to yourself in a way that is encouraging, kind, and like the best motivational coach you've ever had, because that will actually help you get through some things in a more effective way. So you could think about what would be your compassionate statements. And maybe write if there's one of these that you really like, or if you have another one that you tend to use, I'd love for you to share it in the chat. And then the last practice of self-compassion that I wanted to offer you today is since we started late, we have to kind of just spend about 5 minutes on this practice. This is one that I have a longer meditation of on Insight Timer. And so you can get it there if you want to listen to a longer one. But this is a compassionate self-practice where you access your wisest, most compassionate self. You can do this eyes closed. You can do it lying down. Sometimes I like to lie down and put my legs up the wall, or I like to lie down and put some pillows under my knees. Or you could even do this lying in bed. And begin to start with that hand somewhere on your body that feels good. It could be on your cheek or your chest or your belly. And slowing your breath down. So you have some nice long, slow breaths, letting yourself land here. And as you land here, there's you right now, X marks the spot of your life, with some things that are challenging for you, some struggles. And maybe you can bring one to mind right now, something that's on your mind that's been bothering you, that worries you. And you can just allow that struggle to be here. We're going to help you with that tonight, with this compassionate self, this wise self that you have. And I want to introduce you to your wise self. It's always been there, and it's there right now. This wise self is strong. This wise self is steady and centered. This wise self knows what's best for you. This wise self wants you to do well and also wants others to do well. It's a compassionate self that understands our interconnection. And if you imagine you could travel back in time to the left of your body, and you could find a time when you were younger, when you were struggling, sort of this timeline of your life, there's been another time, maybe even be familiar to the struggle you're having now. And if you could find yourself when you were younger, and you could bring this wise, compassionate, centered, encouraging self with you, and you could see yourself in your struggle, and you could look at yourself in your eyes, and you know what it's like to be you. Only you really know. And you could tell yourself something from this wise, compassionate self. What would you say? What would you offer yourself? And then you also know that this wise, compassionate self that's in you didn't begin with you. This timeline of your life goes way back to before you were born, to your ancestors, all the people in your lineage that had a wise, compassionate self. So I'd like for you to imagine them coming up to your younger self and seeing them as well, offering this younger self compassion. And then I'd like for you to imagine you could take your younger self's hand as well as your ancestors taking your younger self's hand and bring all of those people up to this left side of your body so that you can feel them on the left side. Your ancestors, your younger self, and you, this wise self, supported. And then I'd like for you to remember you could look to the right side of your body and see an older version of you. And have that older version of you walk to you right here and right now and see you with this struggle. And if they could offer you some compassion, what would they say? What would they tell you? And knowing that your lineage doesn't end with this life, you will continue on, your continuation, your actions continue on well beyond past when you're gone. You can also see to the right side of your body your lineage well beyond this life and all the people that you will impact, and those wise, compassionate people coming to the right side of your body as well. So here you are in X marks the spot with this struggle, but you can feel yourself surrounded by your younger self, surrounded by your ancestors, surrounded by your future self, surrounded by the continuation of your actions, these kind, compassionate actions. And with your hand on your body right here, you can take a breath and feel that you have a wise, interconnected being that supports you with this struggle. You feel centered, supported, strong, encouraged to hold it, even though it's heavy. And then you can slowly feel that integration of all of that into your body. Slowly bringing your awareness back into this space. So our time was a little bit shorter, but if you'd like, you can listen to a longer version of that meditation is on Insight Timer. And I also have some meditations that are free on my website from drdianahill.com. But I wanted to sort of recap what we talked about. We talked about taking a compassionate pause, just that initial pause of acknowledging that you're struggling, practicing wise speech with yourself, noticing what you're doing in there. Is it kind? Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it timely? And then listening to this wise self, and that your wise self, your wise, compassionate self, is so much bigger than just you. You're not alone when you practice self compassion because your self extends beyond the self with a small s. It's a big S, that includes your history, your lineage, it includes our future. And when we act from that compassionate place, we are a lot like those bees that are fluttering our wings together. We can make a big wind of compassion to support each other and support ourselves. And as I close, this is one more little image of bees festooning, which is linking their hands to support each other. And I hope that's what you have felt at this in this course together. If you'd like to get meditations from me, you can get them at my website. And if you want to learn more, you can check out my podcast and the Self Compassion Daily Journal. And I'll be here tomorrow night for the full 30 minutes talking about values, and in particular, how the things that bring us pain in life, how they reflect what it is we care most about. So thank you for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. Come back at 7:30 Pacific time.